Markle is absolutely buzzing after she and husband Prince Harry returned home from their trip to
Ooh.
Australia. That does feel like something Meghan Markle would be doing. In her mind, this source says, in her mind, it proves everything she's been saying all along, that she doesn't need the palace machine to shine because she just naturally connects with people in a way that feels far more authentic and modern. Did she say this herself? She loves to tell us how authentic she is.
She's got one topic, herself, and one speed, and it's how awful it is to be her. But don't you want to look like her and go to her affiliate link and buy the outfit that she wore at Bondi?
One of the most powerful statements made during the recent Australia tour wasn't spoken at all. It came from a 21-year-old wildlife conservationist who simply chose not to show up. And when you understand why Robert Irwin reportedly turned down the chance to meet Harry and Meghan, you start to see the cracks in a carefully constructed narrative that's been unraveling faster than anyone expected. Let's start with what makes this so fascinating. Robert Irwin and Prince Harry have eerily similar backstories. Both lost a legendary parent in sudden, devastating, and extremely public ways. Both grew up carrying the weight of a name that was bigger than any one person could comfortably bear. Both had to figure out how to honor that legacy without being crushed by it. On paper, this meeting should have been a natural fit, maybe even a genuinely moving moment. Two young men bonded by grief, united by a shared passion for conservation and wildlife. The cameras would have loved it, the headlines would have written themselves, but Robert said no, and that no tells you everything about where things actually stand.
Are more in common with Prince William because they both are resilient. They both are survivors. They do not dwell in what they don't have. They dwell in what they've been given and in their roles on the world stage to try to give back. So why would Robert Irwin want to meet with a loser like Harry?
Reports indicate that Robert Irwin has cultivated a strong working relationship with Prince William through the Earthshot Prize, one of the most ambitious environmental initiatives on the global stage right now. Earthshot isn't a vanity project or a branding exercise. It delivers real, measurable, trackable results. It funds innovators. It creates change you can actually point to. And William's steady, consistent involvement in it reflects a certain kind of leadership, the kind that prioritizes substance over spectacle. Robert Irwin looked at the landscape, weighed his options, and made a calculated decision about where his energy and alliances would serve the greatest long-term purpose. He chose the relationship that was producing tangible outcomes over a photo opportunity with a couple whose tour was generating headlines for all the wrong reasons.
In there, they toss all these generalities around, like building communities and taking stories and blah, blah, blah. It's like, what does it mean? Yeah. What did you do?
Do so carrying with them the stories, insights, and partnerships forged over these 4 days, grounded in a continued commitment to supporting communities and building a more connected, compassionate future. I mean, what the hell does that even mean?
And those wrong reasons are worth examining closely, because they reveal a pattern that keeps growing harder to defend. The Australia tour generated a Roy Morgan poll showing 81% disapproval. Let that number land for a second. In a country that once embraced the couple warmly during their 2018 visit, the sentiment had not just cooled, it had completely reversed. 45,000 Australians signed a petition stating they didn't want the visit and didn't want public funds covering security costs. That's not passive indifference. That's organized, active pushback from real people who took the time to make their voices heard.
He really doesn't. I mean, you never see William kicking around with CBS because I feel like when he takes a stand, he keeps it. But Harry just goes to the highest bidder.
Isn't the line too on William that, you just do not want to get on the opposite side of him, that he can hold a grudge, you know? And I can only imagine what he's got in store for these two when he does ascend to the throne.
Meanwhile, the tour itself presented a strange cocktail of charity appearances and commercial activity that left observers confused about what the actual mission was. When working members of the royal family complete a tour, there's usually a clear paper trail afterward. Charities release updates about new funding. Diplomatic relationships are formalized. Specific programs receive attention and resources. You can track the impact because multiple independent sources confirm it happened. That accountability structure is what gives those tours credibility and purpose. Now contrast that with what followed the Australia visit. The official departure statement spoke broadly about stories, insights, and partnerships, along with a continued commitment to supporting communities and building a more connected, compassionate future. It sounds lovely in the way that a greeting card sounds lovely, pleasant on the surface, but completely empty when you try to extract anything concrete from it. No specific charities were named, no funding was announced, no structured follow-up support was confirmed for the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, or for the women's refuge they visited, or for any cause connected to the Bondi Beach appearance. What did circulate afterward were clothing links and outfit breakdowns. The community being engaged started looking less like a cause and more like a customer base, and that shift in perception changes everything about how the tour is evaluated. This brings us to something that cuts even deeper. The fundamental contradiction at the heart of the entire operation. You cannot position yourself as someone who stepped away from royal life because of its suffocating commercialization and then turn around and use royal titles in product descriptions. You cannot claim authentic human connection as your brand identity and then post affiliate links to the outfit you wore at a memorial event. You cannot say you left the institution because it was toxic and then monetize the association with that same institution at every available opportunity. These contradictions aren't subtle, they're glaring, and people are noticing them with increasing sharpness. 61% of British respondents in recent polling said they do not want the continued monetization of royal titles. That's not a fringe opinion. That's a decisive majority expressing a clear boundary before the couple has even arrived for their anticipated summer return. The blueprint, as the Sussex team reportedly described it, is already facing resistance from the very audience it needs to win over. What makes Robert Irwin's quiet distance so illuminating is how starkly it contrasts with the approach being taken on the other side. Robert lost his father, Steve Irwin, at just 9 years old, in one of the most sudden and publicly witnessed tragedies imaginable. The grief from that kind of loss doesn't disappear. It lives in you permanently. But Robert made a deliberate choice about how to carry it. He honored his father by continuing the mission, by building his own identity within conservation, by showing up on platforms like Dancing with the Stars with genuine enthusiasm, and by channeling his energy into work that creates real impact. None of it feels performed or calculated for sympathy. It reads as someone who decided early on that the best way to honor loss is through forward motion and meaningful contribution.
Robert Irwin could teach Prince Harry a thing or two about the loss of a parent and how to function with joy afterwards and learn the lessons and just contribute positively to the world. So now I'm kind of like, maybe actually this relationship should develop. What do you think would happen first? The palace stepping in and saying, check yourself before you wreck yourself, or Harry and Meghan listening to legitimate feedback like we're seeing circulating all over the internet, all over the world, and going, no, that this doesn't work. Maybe we need to reconsider how we do this going forward.
Well, like all narcissists, true malignant narcissists, they never admit that they're wrong.
Harry has taken a markedly different path. The memoir, the streaming series, the high-profile interviews, they consistently circle back to the same well of grievance. The royal family, the institution, the loss of his mother. The grief itself is undoubtedly real and deeply felt. Nobody reasonable questions that. But transforming that grief into recurring public content is a separate decision. And it's a decision that belongs entirely to him. When the narrative keeps returning to pain and blame rather than growth and contribution, it shapes how everything else gets received. Every tour, every appearance, every statement gets filtered through that lens, and the filter isn't flattering. There's also a striking irony involving CBS that deserves attention. Years ago, when the network aired a program that included images from the Paris crash, both Harry and William condemned it forcefully, and understandably they called it invasive and disrespectful. That reaction was completely justified. But later, Harry chose CBS as the platform for one of his most significant American interviews, sitting down for a major primetime conversation. He has consistently avoided giving that same level of access to British outlets. The principle that once drove the condemnation seemed to evaporate when the opportunity was large enough and the American market was receptive enough that selectiveness doesn't go unnoticed. And it feeds into a broader perception that convictions bend when commercial incentives enter the picture. The reconciliation narrative adds yet another layer of complexity to all of this. After nearly every reported interaction between Harry and King Charles, stories surface suggesting a reunion is imminent, that progress is being made, that things are different now. But almost immediately afterward, signals of frustration emerge from the palace, particularly when private efforts seem to find their way into media coverage with suspicious speed. This cycle has repeated so many times that it's become its own pattern. Real reconciliation requires genuine privacy and mutual trust, but in the current dynamic, private conversations keep becoming public narratives framed and distributed in ways that consistently favor one interpretation. The kind of trust needed for authentic repair simply cannot develop when every step toward it risks becoming tomorrow's headline. And here's the uncomfortable truth lurking beneath all of it. For the broader Sussex operation, the ongoing distance from the royal family is actually valuable. It keeps attention high, interest strong, and the story alive. Full reconciliation, if it truly happened, would dissolve the tension that fuels public fascination, that creates a fundamental contradiction between the stated desire for family repair and the operational reality that benefits from continued conflict. Australian MP David Limbrick's call for security cost reimbursement highlighted another fault line in the model. When engagements are presented as partly royal but generate commercial value for private individuals, the question of who pays for security becomes genuinely uncomfortable. Revenue from appearances and brand partnerships doesn't flow back to taxpayers in Commonwealth countries, but the security costs potentially do. That imbalance is difficult to justify, and it's exactly the kind of issue that gains traction when public sentiment is already skeptical. Looking ahead to the summer, all of these threads converge into something significant. The British public has followed this story more closely and for longer than any other audience. Opinions are deeply formed and firmly held. The existing record, the polling data, the documented tour outcomes, the financial reporting, the public reactions, none of it resets because a new season arrives. It accumulates, it builds, and it creates a context that every future appearance has to contend with. Behind the scenes, decisions are being made even if nobody is announcing them publicly. King Charles is expected to remain measured and hands-off. Prince William will likely continue his strategic silence, maintaining firm boundaries without engaging in public debate. Institutions and venues connected to events will quietly evaluate whether involvement genuinely benefits them, and the public will watch, assess, and draw conclusions in real time, just as they did in Australia. That moment on Bondi Beach captures something essential about where things stand. A woman sitting on the sand noticed the approaching entourage, paused briefly, then simply returned to her journal. No excitement, no rush to get closer, just calm, complete disinterest. That quiet reaction mirrors the broader sentiment that showed up in every poll, every petition, and every critical commentary that followed the tour. Different people, different contexts, but the same conclusion appearing again and again. Robert Irwin's reported decision fits perfectly into that pattern. He assessed the situation with clear eyes, weighed the potential risks against the possible benefits, and recognized that the downsides of association far outweighed anything a brief meeting could offer. Being linked to figures surrounded by constant controversy, public criticism, and institutional tension carries real reputational consequences, especially when your most important professional relationships depend on stability and trust. The Earthshot connection is worth protecting. A photo opportunity with a couple facing 81% disapproval in the host country is not. What the Queen always understood, and what makes the question of her official biography so consequential right now, is that the record endures. Once something is documented, observed, and confirmed from multiple angles, it becomes permanent. It doesn't bend to suit preferred narratives. It doesn't soften because someone releases a polished statement. It sits there fully formed and available for anyone willing to look honestly at what happened versus what was claimed. The evidence from this chapter, the tour outcomes, the polling numbers, the commercial patterns, the institutional responses, the quiet refusals from people like Robert Irwin, all of it points consistently in one direction. The gap between the official narrative and observable reality has grown so wide that even outlets once sympathetic to the couple are now highlighting it openly. When that shift happens in the media landscape, it rarely reverses. The summer will test whether any of this prompts genuine recalibration or whether the same approach continues unchanged. History suggests the latter because the operational incentives all point toward maintaining the current model regardless of external feedback. But the audience isn't passive and their conclusions are already formed. The blueprint has been set, the receipts are stacked, and every new chapter simply adds to a record that keeps growing more detailed and more difficult to dispute. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.